Shalom, shalom, friends. Thank you so much for being here. We're thrilled to have our first partnered event with HEA in Denver today. So thank you all for tapping in from that new partner community. And we are thrilled today to engage in some learning and interview on Embers of Pilgrimage, very exciting new book with both the author and the publisher here with us today. And Dr. Eitan Fishbane is Associate Professor of Jewish Thought at the Jewish Theological Seminary in Manhattan, where he writes and teaches about Jewish mysticism from medieval Kabbalah to modern Hasidism. In addition to Embers of Pilgrimage, poems, the subject of today's event, Fishbane is also the author of several other books, including The Art of Mystical Narrative, a Poetics of the Zohar, published by Oxford University Press, and As Light Before Dawn, The Inner World of a Medieval Kabbalist, published by Stanford University Press. We're also privileged to have here Rabbi Aubrey Glazer, who not only is the publisher and a scholar, but it offers the interpretive introduction here to this wonderful book of poetry. We're going to jump a little bit back and forth between screen share because from the PDF where we have the manuscript, there's a few different poems we're going to, that Professor Fishbane has selected that we will have the opportunity to learn from. And the format is going to be a poem, and then I will ask an open question, and then a poem and a question, and then we'll get to hear from Rabbi Glazer, and then all of you can join in as well. So this is very exciting. The last thing I want to say, it is just one of the great things about Professor Eitan Fishbane is not only the depth of his scholarship, of course, and the creativity of his poetry and the authenticity of it, but the menschlichkeit and the kind spirit and soul that comes along with all of the work. So Professor Eitan Fishbane, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Rav Shmuley, and thank you for the really kind words. And I mentioned to you before, I really admire your warm, kind spirit and your menschlichkeit and all that you do in the world. So thank you for having me.
Okay, well, I'm going to jump straight to Sedona.
We knew we had to start with Sedona, the Sedona and Golden Rust, because of course we are Valley Beit Midrash is located in the holy Admat, in the Admat Kodesh of Arizona, and also the cover of the book, as you can see here, is a picture I took when I visited Bell Rock. For those of I'm sure there are some of you who are familiar with that. And as I'm reading the poem, maybe try to give a listen for, and as you're looking at both whether you're a visual engager or an auditory engager or both, to try to get a sense of some of the intersection of the representation of the natural world, the naturalism, the sacred in the natural world, which is a big theme of this poem. I won't give too much of a preamble. We'll talk about that afterwards, and also its potential spiritual mystical and its spiritual mystical elements, its theological elements. So try to hear where you feel that most powerfully. Dreams, Sedona in gold and rust. Dreams of the past. Into solitude, beyond room and study. Words of the Concord sage inscribed in me at the beginning of my way. Uplifted into infinite space, a perfect exhilaration, currents of the universal being circulate through me. And the dancing mystic howling into the night, far from the marketplace and the crossroads, toward the nothing at the soul of all. Then in the day when the trees and fields are gathered up like kindling into his prayer, melodies singular and symphonic, notes to the score of wonder. Or the woodlands are reshaped into an otherworldly instrument, soloist playing in slow, undulating dance before his darkened audience. Then a quartet, then a symphony of sound, music vessels of the hand, seen only in the prophet's eye, heard only in the chambers of his mind, resonating like two thick strings of a caramel and amber violin, reaching forward to the breaking open of souls. Piercing and crying of E, folded into A, bent in the shape of minor lament, exploding into organ fugue before it is sorrowful klezmer once again. A lifetime of sadness collapsed into 3 lines of score, released into visionary mind, infant born of the soothed and clarified heart, melody and solitude. The river flowing from the upland and down to the Black Sea basin into a forest of oak, maple, and elm he withdraws, cry of the Rebbe resounding across the surface of deep time. And here, now, in this sublime American Southwest, I find myself a world away. Into the North Country I pass, the desert highlands beyond the Valley of the Sun, mountain air of this enchanted earth where memory lasts in the millions of years, recalling how once there was an ancient sea, volcanic rupture and the slow, loving kiss of lapping waters, iron bled sandstone, vibrant rust, layers of history marked in the salt lines, red rock, secret mountain wilderness, guarding the whispered prayers of all who have crossed her trails. Anasazi, Hohokam, Sinagua, Yavapai, Apache, Navajo, their words a jumbled mystery and yet inscribed in the stone and in the memory of the earth and plant life. The heart of her brimming vitality, gentle current of Oak Creek, life restored in the juniper wood, burning in the medicine man's fire. Fragrant smoke, clearing energy and air. Chaparral interior, leaves powdered or tea steeped, healing the pilgrim, wanderer, lost. Cottonwood, sycamore, velvet ash, desert ironwood, and capclaw acacia, banana yucca, speargrass, redberry juniper, Arizona walnut, four-wing saltbrush, shrubby buckwheat, and agave. Plenitude of formation primordial, breath and speech of the land murmuring softly, exhale of a living creature, sweeping over the sunlit face of the hiker, crossing borders into wilderness sanctified, yerba pinyon ponderosa. Solitary Kaddish, whispered, wrapped in the pure white talus from a day long ago, and the psalms sung low and slow as meditation, the work of his hands spoken by the heavens. Memory in this place is endless, like Ein Sof, overflowing into mind, emptied of color, all potential of what will be, but still the fullness of what was in the time before time, when all there was time. Pilgrim's journey to the cathedral on high, towering over red plateaus, meditators lying supine on the rocks, absorbing her gentle and soothing breath, brisk sun flowing into the crevices of untold pain in 1,000 passers through, each an ache unique. And she, force of the cathedral, mystery of the one-seed juniper, bathes and rinses the weight of hearts. Even if first she lifts that fiercely burning sorrow from the dark well of inward hiding, raising it to the searing presence of feeling and knowing. Only then can the climb break you open, fragile and vulnerable, like the mountain bluebird to the black hawk, plunging from the sky with talons raised at 200 miles an hour. He steps out of the rain into the shops at Tlaquepaque, loft overflowing with the intricate vision of a carpet weaver, this one nearly all silk, smooth and cool to the touch. And in the inner eye, the wood carvings and small hand-painted boxes designed to hold secrets, promises, regrets. What secret will your box hold? The lover's letter to the one who is like scar tissue over the wound of memory. Or perhaps the spices of another time unearthed for separating holy from profane at the moment of soul crossing. The lamplights emerge with the coming of night, and their glow reflects on the rain-swept cobblestone path that weaves between visions and artists. In the gallery, cobalt blue with shades of azure, egg and bowl-shaped, glistening and drawing the meditative gaze, strewn with sand-hued speckle and draped with curtain-like layers of willemite crystalline glaze on porcelain. In this wilderness, beyond the well-worn pathways of trail, he knows the creatures, predator and prey, crouch in hiding and rush through the bear grass, the mesquite and the hackberry, coyote, mule deer and javelina, ringtail cat, black-tailed jackrabbit, Arizona tarantula, and the rattlers, western diamondback, Mojave, black-tailed. In the trees and fields and streams of this pinyon juniper woodland, the black-chinned hummingbird sings its song. The blue heron spreads its majestic wings and fishes for dinner. And the ladder-backed woodpecker cackles and chirps as it rises in the quiet daytime heat. Not far is the sweet flow of Oak Creek, and here in the Rimrock Verde Valley, surrounded by ancient red butte and the sea lines of primordial waters, all the rich varieties of life are reminded of their oneness, where the hiker breathes in his exhilaration, leaning on his stick like a wandering monk from long ago, smiling at the slow, sublime ascent of God's face in the golden rust of late afternoon.
Wow. Wow. I feel like we can spend the entire time just on this poem here. Literally, I mean, we can spend hours. It's so wonderful. It's so wonderful. And as someone who doesn't spend a lot of time listening to the reading of poetry, or really any time in recent years, there were moments that literally I felt you were jumping out of the text. And one of those moments is when you talk about God's face, because we know God's face, in our tradition is so hidden. And this notion of kind of the appearance of God's face is this moment of revelation, emerging. And then you ask this question. The question like pops out. It pierces me. What secret will your box hold? I feel you jump out of the text at that moment. Now you're bringing me in. You're pulling me in at a new level. But the part that surprisingly startled me the most is when the solitary Kaddish emerges. I'm like, wait a minute. Why is this particularity entering into this moment of universality? I wondered how a Jew who's not engaged in their Judaism experiences when Judaism kind of touches them, because I was so immersed in this universality that I couldn't believe when Kaddish came in. Where's Kaddish? So I'm very moved. And here's just two questions I have for you. One is, if you can share a little bit of a reflection on the context of what you're doing in Sedona. Where are you in Sedona? And the second is this particular phrase here on the first page, where it says, currents of the universal being circulate through me. Now I know about the presence, I know about an encounter, I know about the energy. What is it about currents? What does it feel like to have currents? Divine currents. And what does it mean for that to circulate? Enter, pierce, transcend, circulate. And then alongside that, in such a quiet, intimate moment, why is the being universal? Why am I beyond here in such a quiet, intimate moment? So feel free to take any of that or none of that as you wish.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Shmuley, and for taking it in so deeply. I'll start actually with with your mention of the opening lines of the poem, so this is actually and in the book version. These are obviously this is what the book looks like, but in the book there are also endnotes that explain some of these illusions, because there are a number of different things here that actually are semi-coded or symbolic illusions. Some who are who may be more or less familiar with different aspects. You know, this first piece is an allusion to Emerson, to Ralph Waldo Emerson, as the conquered sage, and actually the italicized language there is actually a quote from his essay Nature, his famous essay Nature, where he talks about the experience of crossing a snow-puddled common in Massachusetts in October, and it was gray and so forth. But he experiences a perfect exhilaration. I didn't include the line there, which is this phenomenal line where he says, "I am a transparent eyeball. I am nothing. I see all." Right, and it's in this kind of sense of, and then this is where he says, "This issue of the currents of universal being flow through me," which really became kind of like a call and a stimulus into my own attempts to evoke the way in which being situated within the sublime, right, within the nature that is mysterious, that is powerful, that is transcendent, that is sacred, can open up these kind of streams of universal connection that are the life flow, life force of God, of divinity. So there's this, and there's this, and that's also evoked actually in the opening lines of section 2, which is a kind of somewhat coded allusion to Nachman of Bratslav. Actually, this section, that's the Rebbe of whom I speak there. In part because he, right, in terms of the Black Sea Basin and so forth, right, in his going into the woods to have a kind of mystical experience in 19th century Ukraine, and his emphasis that the experience of what he called hitbodedut, or this solitary meditation, was an attempt to become absorbed into the ayin, into the nothingness, the nothing that is at the soul of everything, right? It's sort of the nothing that is the everything, a sort of the mystery of the mystical. And so in this case, this kind of experience of something that is quintessentially American in landscape, or at least in the height of the beauties of the American geographical identity, right? This kind of wonder of America. There also are encoded all of these layered elements of experience in history, right? All of those who came before this hiker, came before us in this place, right? All of the indigenous people who lived in this place, and all of the wildlife that continues to live in this place, but also connecting it to that universality of feeling the divine presence coursing through, right? What Emerson meant by the universal being circulating through me was very much his vision of nature as a site of the sacred in a powerful, sublime way. And so the poem, as you really very much intuited and captured there, right? There's in your comments, right, is that was this kind of mysterious intersection, and the poem seeks to represent that mysterious intersection of our deeply individual, all too human, all too personal experiences with life and suffering and joy and mortality and memory and hope. And part of that, right, as you mentioned, the solitary Kaddish, without delving too far into that in this exact moment, but it's a big part of the book, is also the element of nostalgia, of remembering, of grief, of loss, of the experience of death. As it happens, when I wrote and then was thinking about a lot of this poem, it coincided actually with the yahrzeit of my first wife, Leah, Zichrona Livracha, and so that was specifically my kind of very individual experience, which also there are a number of poems in here that deal with that, and mainly in the nostalgia section of the book, but they're woven together. It's kind of like this attempt to weave together the mystical and the deeply personal, and a sense you're also just thinking about, and you or of Aubrey may have a follow-up to this piece also. I don't know, depending on how we want to structure the flow based on what we were talking about. But this image also of in the day, how the trees and fields are gathered up like kindling into his prayer. This is also a indirect/direct allusion to Nachman of Bratslav and his belief, actually, that often situated in nature and in the particularities and depths of the natural world, that the song of God arises from the heart in a different kind of way, with a different kind of depth, and that actually the very grasses and plantings and wonders of nature, of the field and of the trees and of the meadows and so forth, that and all of the particularities of predator and prey and plant life that I seek to evoke there are also about that kind of emerging spiritual song to God, that the mystic, spiritual seeker, hiker, wanderer, pilgrim, right, in the sense of Embers of Pilgrimage, because this was a kind of pilgrimage in some ways, not just a pilgrimage to Sedona, but a pilgrimage within Sedona, right, and a pilgrimage into the heart in some ways. I don't know. I somehow wove together some of your questions there. I don't know if we want to talk a little bit more about
wonderful.
that.
In the interest of time, I would love to go to the second reading, if that's okay for you.
Great, sure, absolutely, and
Awesome.
that's wonderful.
There you go.
Wonderful, beautiful. Thank you so much, Pam. Okay, so as I mentioned, this book really is it's a contemporary American mystical, American infused, Americana infused, and also Jewish mysticism infused, right? Because that's my area of academic scholarship, Kabbalah and Hasidism. So it finds its way through in this more artistic attempt to represent some of these different features. This particular poem, which is called Gilgul, which is the Hebrew term for reincarnation, which was some may be very surprised to know, some for whom it's familiar, was actually a major feature of Jewish thought, not just of other religious traditions, of which we sometimes more typically associated with. It actually spanned various religious traditions. There's actually a very interesting book that I've used in some classes related to this by Gananath Obesekare, called Imagining Karma, which talks about issues of reincarnation. I think it was published by Princeton or California, on different issues of rebirth and reincarnation. Okay, so this was my kind of like twist on this theme. So here we go. Gilgul. I am suspended, weightless, in this amniotic fluid of mystery. Nourished, sheltered, gestating in the eternity before this birth, quarry of souls, through dimensions of becoming. To be thrown, tumbling into the fierce light of day, like that recurring dream terror of falling into an abyss of darkness below, where what is before and what is after is revealed in a whisper to the one who already knows without knowing, mevin midato. Intuition of wonder, attuned to music of the sublime, how she just understands. Of something from nothing, creations making in the grand workshop of heaven's artist, wood chip, oil on canvas, marble and clay, apprentice angels bent over their work, dreamy afternoon light of that divine city, of fire-ringed chariots and dark breath floating over the deep waters of no time. Eternal opening in the barely visible horizon, cloaked in vanishing light. Divine rhythms pulsing like an unconscious remembering of Sinai. Heartbeat in the inner ear, knocking voice of an ancient beloved, stirred again to the waking mind. I am asleep, but my heart is awake. And flame surrounds the ones absorbed in secrets, mysteries of the book that vanishes in a flare of light, disappeared by the approaching brush of this all too human mind. Love lavished pages and binding, musty smell of long lost library halls, the towers and hidden entrances, stairways and rooms within rooms, remnant of the ancient breath of a time cradled softly in the dark womb of history and eternity, the same, folded naturally and supernaturally onto itself. It's a little shorter than Sedona, but
So once again, it's hard to know where to begin. Just one short question, which is really a meta question about intellectual and spiritual creativity, picking up on one line you use, which emerges from our Jewish theology, which is yesh me'ayin. yesh ma'ayin, something from nothing. How do you understand the human capacity for yesh ma'ayin?
I think that really at the first, right, this, right, as you allude to this, this classic idea of older Judaism and philosophy and mysticism, the idea that yesh me'ayin, meaning something from nothing, that somehow this somethingness of reality was created by God from the nothingness that preceded it, right? That it had to have become had to have emerged in that particular way, and yesh me'ayin. Maybe even before I get back to a couple of thoughts on the lines right around that piece in the poem that you pointed to. This also has a powerful Hasidic mystical resonance, right? This is 18th, 19th Eastern European Jewish mysticism, of the sense that yesh, which means essentially this, or physicality, or embodiedness, right? That's our incarnated experience. That's our physical experience of sensation, and that almost deep within that is this spiritual nothing, this spiritual thing called the ayin, the nothingness, right? It becomes psychologized. It's not just that God creates something from nothing, but that we ourselves have elements of something and nothing within ourselves, that yesh becomes the outer layer, let's say the garment, the shell, and ayin, nothing or nothingness, becomes the inner spiritual dimension that's almost like a kind of direct channel, direct corridor to the eternity, the eternality, the infinity of divinity that is found actually deep within ourselves, like the Sfas Emes, like the the Gera Rebbe of late 19th century Warsaw says in his work, the Sfat Emet, the language of truth, that we each contain a inner, hidden, holy, mysterious point within our hearts, and that inner holy point, that hidden point, is this dimension of divinity that dwells as immanence within ourselves, and that takes us back to God. But here also, and looking at how I juxtapose this also with the lines that on the bottom third of page 56, which you're looking at there, right, of what is before and what is after, revealed in a whisper to the one who already knows without knowing, mevin midato, how she just understands, right? So this is kind of, and if we correlate this to the issue of ayin or nothingness, and that there's a dimension that, let's say, yesh represents this dimension of what we can know and we can feel and we can experience in an outward directional way. And the ayin represents that ethereal, mysterious dimension that almost eludes ordinary mind, right? If we can say that one of the characteristics of mysticism more broadly is the very idea that there is a kind of mystery at the soul of existence and at the heart of my humanity and so forth, that is essentially divine unknowing, right? It is essentially this kind of beyond ordinary knowing. So both what is before and what is after is revealed in a whisper, is an allusion to the idea that, well, you should keep secret that which is before and that which is after, right? That's an allusion to a mystical idea and that when you reveal such things about Ma'aseh Breshit, about the creation of the world, that you should do it in a whisper, revealed in a whisper. The Zohar says this also, as do some of the ancient sages, that you kind of say it almost in a whisper, represents that mystery. And you do it, who do you communicate that mystery of ayin to, that mystery of nothingness to? It is to the one who already knows without knowing, one who already knows without knowing, mevin mi da'ato. So what is that? That's a reference to Mishnah Chagiga 2. So it's an early reflection on the nature of the categories of mysticism from early rabbinic literature. The idea of mevin mi da'ato means one who understands from their own mind. And the question that always is raised is, well, why do we say that you can only teach and transmit this aspect of this most secret aspect of mysticism, which is called Maseh Merkava, the work of the chariot, to one who is already mevin mi da'ato, somehow understands. And the way I like to understand that is that it represents a kind of sense of, well, like how do I to one who is spiritually attuned to it, right? Or one who spiritually gets it in some particular way, in the same sense that some are more tuned into music or to mathematics or to poetry or to painting or to whatnot, right? Or philosophy and so forth. Right. In other words, that to some extent our minds, our souls, our hearts understand certain things almost in an instinctual way, right? Or that we kind of intuit it, right? So I can only teach this particular kind of spiritual nothingness, so to speak, to someone who already kind of gets a glimmer of it. Maybe they don't get all the details, they don't know all the details of it, but they kind of are spiritually in tune with it.
Wow. Well, do we have time for a third?
How are we doing with time? I feel glance at the. Or
do you want to pause here? Maybe we should pause here.
Maybe it's a good. Maybe given the time, it is a good place to stop and okay. Discuss and
amazing. Amazing. So let's welcome Rabbi Glazer's voice into the room, and then we'll open it up to everyone else, if that's okay. Thank you so much.
Beautiful. Okay. Thank you, Shmuley.
Thank you.
Aubrey, you're on mute.
There we go. So I was in the Atar de lo Have. That's the place without sound that happens sometimes on Zoom. But a major yasher koach to Reb Shmuley and to Pam, and of course the eloquent and supple reading of Eitan. Reb Shmuley, as you noticed and shared with us, it's so important to have forums where we can actually hear living poets speak their poetry. It really is a Torah Shabbal Peh. It really is an oral tradition, and it really jumps off the page. I'm reading this again and hearing it for like the 16th time, but it feels like it's the first time, because every time Eitan reads it, there's something new that emerges. It's Bechoyam Tamid Maaseh Bereshit, as we say in the literature. You know, it's part of this creative process, and you asked about it earlier. I think it's really important to dwell on it for a moment, just to appreciate the genius of what Eitan is doing here. And I want to suggest that what to me was so unique and really struck me about these Embers of Pilgrimage is Eitan's uncanny ability to be able to bring the depth and the breadth of not only all of Jewish literature, including, as you just heard, rabbinic literature, as well as the whole spectrum of mystical literature, but he has a really remarkable ability and gift at being able to translate these incredibly arcane and obscure and difficult terms, especially within mysticism, into its poetic landscape. And the fact that he started with Sedona and ended with Gilgul kind of shows you the depth and the breadth of what it is that he's doing. And I feel, and the reason why Panui, as a think tank that now is publishing primary and secondary texts in modern and contemporary Jewish mysticism, we felt that this work was emblematic of the mission of what we're trying to achieve, which is to expose people to this mystical landscape. And I loved the way that Reb Shmuley, that you reacted to this. Like you're reading Emerson, you're in Sedona, and all of a sudden this talus jumps in out of nowhere in this little black box. Like, where is this entire crazy mashup coming from? It could only come from the ingenious pen and the kulmus of an American Jewish mystic like Eitan. So I want to just really emphasize how unique what it is that Eitan's poetic voice is bringing to bear here, and for us to appreciate that these are the kinds of things that that I would say can only happen in America on the one hand, and on the other hand, they could only happen in Eretz HaKodesh. The other side of my interest in the work that we do at Panui and my own journey through poetry is working with contemporary Hebrew poets writing mysticism in Hebrew in Israel. But I really think it's important that we also highlight the amazing ingenious talents that we have right here in America. And in terms of the poetic landscape, writing deeply American and deeply Jewish poetry in a way that allows the two of them to kind of kiss, if you will, as scripture says, that those two worlds need to be more in conversation with each other. So my passion for this project is really the ingenuity of what Eitan has brought to bear, and I hope that people will take advantage not only of listening to the poet speaking these words and making them come alive, so that Torah She'Ba'al Peh emerges from Torah She'Bichtav, that the oral experience of hearing this. It's so important, Shmuley, that you're supporting this kind of activity through the Beit Midrash, because the Beit Midrash and the amazing work you do is all about making these words come alive in Chavruta, in that dyadic kind of a poetic landscape. But as well, one of the things that we did that Eitan acknowledged, and that you'll see in the actual format of the book, is that part of Panui's mission is that we insisted in this case that there are endnotes. So it follows the prescription that you have in your base midrash and that you teach all the time, Reb Shmuley, Zilu Gmar. So you've heard this amazing poetry, and Eitan alluded to it inevitably and in his own humble way. There's so much depth and breadth in terms of every single line and word. And we went to great efforts at the end of this edition to invite people into a further path of learning. We hope that they'll join in at Valley Base Midrash and in other places where you can go into some of these texts in much greater depth. Maybe you'll study with Eitan when he does things online, whatever the case may be. But there is a whole journey of discovering the treasure trove of Jewish literature that comes from even just a single word. And you were pointing out certain phrases that caught you as an erudite learner and teacher of Shmuley, and I'm sure that other words and other turns of phrase will catch other people. So the invitation is Zilu Gmar. If you've found something in this poetry that excites you, go deeper into the world of poetry and also go deeper into the world of learning, just to appreciate the palette from which Eitan is ingeniously crafting this remarkable work.
Thank you so much. Thank you so
you,
much.
Aubrey.
Okay, Eddie, I saw you come on video. Did you want to jump in here?
Yes, Yasher Koach, Rabbi Eitan. I could visualize what you were saying in the Sedona poem. I could see what you were seeing. My question is, how do you, after you have experienced everything, how do you come in and then put it into words? How do you contextualize everything so beautifully? After finding inspiration in Sedona, what is the process to then put it on paper?
Well, first, thanks, Aubrey. Right, so first, I appreciate that Eddie has given me smicha. It's you know, I stuck with the PhD, but I deeply I'm deeply and I'm not a rabbi, but I'm deeply connected to spiritual life and the training of rabbis and so forth. But thank you, Eddie. I feel like Sedona, and that was actually the last time that I saw I think that I saw your face, at least not on Facebook, right, in person when I several years ago when I was out in Arizona, and that was and the allusion to the Valley of the Sun, right? I'm sure that was not lost on you, right? That also. That was my gateway into the magic of Sedona, right? Which I had heard about from a number of people, and it was a very powerful spiritual breakthrough experience for me, right? And not just the kind of the symbolism of, let's say, my climb up Cathedral Rock, which has a kind of religious dimension to it, but also the kind of the broader way in which, like Emerson, Lahavdil, and like other essayists and poets, John Muir among them, and Whitman, Walt Whitman, and Annie Dillard and Kathleen Norris, and a variety of other important American and non-American thinkers open up the idea that that nature itself is a kind of, and Nachman of Bratslav too, in his way, very much, right? See the kind of the naturalistic, the experience of the sublime in nature as a kind of opening of heaven's gates, right there, right? A kind of opening of the doorway into divine presence, into the numinous, right? Which means the sacred or the holy, and how it reverberates. As so many have said that how they've felt in Sedona, and others have written about Sedona as a spiritual place. So I was primed for that, but it actually was that experience for me. I hope that addresses some of what you were saying, Eddie. But
Great. So we have a hand up here from Dr. Mona Fishbane.
that name sounds familiar. Wait a minute.
I just want to say I'm totally objective. Okay, let's start there. Secondly, it's beautiful reading, Eitan. Secondly, the poster behind me is Sedona, FYI. Thirdly, I found my vortex in Sedona. I think, Eitan, what you're doing is addressing the universal desire for wisdom, for spirituality, whether it's finding your vortex in Sedona or Emerson's poetry or Nachman, right? That there's, or Emerson, I think that there is for many of us, not everyone, obviously, there is a universal desire for transcendence and for connecting with the divine. And we all struggle with it in our own way. And I think in your poetry, you combine the universal with the specific in very powerful ways, and bringing together so many different strands of seekers, which I think is really wonderful.
Well, thank you, Dr. Mona Fishbane, otherwise known as Mom.
And I'm not a rabbi either.
But beautiful. So wonderful to have you here, and thank you for that.
Let me just say one thing. Oh, sorry, Pam. I apologize.
Oh no, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to note that part of what Mona was referring to, that Eitan is doing, again, just to take notice of it, is like for Emerson to have a conversation with Reb Nachman Breslov seems like totally absurd, right? To all of us, like they can't talk to each other, different time-space continuums, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, the 19th century, right?
But still, they probably weren't talking to each other, right? Or the Sfat Emet and Emerson, whatever. We'll change the time frame. But if you're back in the Beit Midrash, Ein mukdam vein muchar b'Torah, right? The idea is there's no chronology in the world of Torah, and if Torah is an infinite poem, then we get to this place that Eitan is tapping into. Sorry, Pam. I just wanted to say that.
Oh no, definitely worth noting. My question was, how long did this take for you to put together and write and think over and publish? And what do you do in the moments where the words don't come?
It's interesting. There are some poems in here, including a kind of including one that is an ode to the revered Jerusalem cafe Tmol Shil Shom that many may be familiar with. That called in this volume is called Scenes from a Cafe at Twilight, which I dedicated to the memory of David Ehrlich Zal, who is the founder of Tmol Shil Shom. And actually which was a place back when I was probably about 20 years old. I would sit for many hours as David talks about fictionally in his forthcoming English translation of a Hebrew novel called Cafe Shira, which I have a blurb on the back of, so it's going to be coming out, and I was delving into that about the way in which all of these characters sit in this cafe, this literary cafe, right? This cafe where Yehuda Amichai would sit for hours and hours, and there was a chair called Yehuda's chair, and there was short story writer and novelist Nathan Englander, before he was well known, was sitting there writing at the table across from me, and a few others, right? And David Grossman, and it's an amazing place, and everybody kind of has their own story about Tmol Shil Shom. I'm sure Aubrey has his stories, and others. So there are some poems that go back a long way, a few poems, but there are a lot that were written much more recently, some through a series of experiences over the past number of years, but then also in the past couple of years, even more intensively, some of that erupted in certain ways. But I do find, just to your last point, I do find that the kind of, and this is true of also with my other writing, my more academic writing, but it's especially true of poetry, that there kind of are these moments where you feel that the universal current is streaming through you, right? And it's kind of like the inspiration for writing, right? Which I'm sure Rav Shmuley and Rav Aubrey are familiar with, and right. So there's a sense in which like how the words come and where they come forth from the heart, from the spirit, from the mind, and for me, as we were just talking about, there's this kind of convergence of a number of different features, right? Early on in my formation, which was when I was in college at Brandeis, and I was and one of my mentors there, before I went down the Kabbalah path more directly, was Professor John Burt, who wrote in English and American poetry, and he's written about Robert Penn Warren and Lincoln, and he's an original poet himself. He's a professor at Brandeis. He was an important teacher of mine early on. He was actually, I think, one of the first people I really studied Emerson deeply with. There's a lot more to say about that, but there's kind of, and with him, I also studied mystical themes in American and British poetry. So it's kind of like this kind of interesting confluence of different influences, right? I then went more professionally, as it were, down the get a Ph.D. in Kabbalah path, and that's another great love of mine, as you can see in the book. But also the literary and poetic dimensions are very much still alive and well.
Amazing. Thank you so much for this gift you've given us with this today, and the gift you've given us with this publication. We hope everyone on the Zoom and those on Facebook Live and those on the recording end of this while you're cooking and jogging and doing everything you're doing, that you will appreciate what has happened here. The depth of learning combined with the depth of the experiential realm, combined with the sophistication of being able to share and present. that realm of the inner life of the past and the inner life of the current, in a way that intertwines such a scholarship and a depth of soul. And so this is not only great for us to buy and read and learn and share and have a chavruta around these texts, which I encourage us all to do. It is also an invitation for us to emulate this path, for us to go deeper in our own ability to learn Jewish mysticism and to engage in the spiritual endeavor and to try to combine those journeys in our own attempt to be creative and authentic. So thank you for both what you've offered us and for the inspiration that you're inviting us into. And we hope this is the first of many times we'll learn with you virtually and in person. So thank you, Professor Fishbane. Thank you, Rabbi Glazer. And thank you all of us who are here with us.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Rav Shmuley. Thank you, Pam. And I really appreciate both of you in making this happen, and Rav Aubrey, your deep insights as well. So wonderful to be here. Thank you for having me as your guest.
Thank
Like to everybody. Thank you so much.